Particularly Orkney and Shetland, again, similar to today, really. It is going to be often quite cloudy here. As we go through the day tomorrow, plenty of sunshine on offer yet again. Perhaps a little bit more high cloud than we've seen through today, so the sunshine may be a little bit hazy at times, and there could be some thicker cloud towards parts of East Anglia and Lincolnshire. But actually, temperatures are likely to be a little bit higher, a degree or so, so highs of around 18, 19 Celsius perhaps. As we go into Wednesday, and a bit of a change because of the position of the high pressure. So eastern parts going to be dragging in quite a bit of cloud here. So a cloudier story than we've seen of late across the east. Further west, though, plenty of sunshine and again, feeling pretty warm. More fine sunny weather to come as we go through the end of the week, though there may be a bit of rain starting to push into the far north later on. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Nick Arkell. The M56 eastbound is really busy near Chester. Junction 15 to 14, queuing where there was a broken down vehicle. The M25 clockwise is still backing up where there was a collision. Junction 18, the queues from 16. The M1 southbound is really busy with two lorries colliding in between Watford Gap services and Junction 16. Long delays on the approach. The M6 northbound in Cheshire is busy. A lane closure on Thelwall Viaduct, Junction 20 to 21. Slowing things down, a broken down vehicle on the A14 westbound is blocked through Suffolk with a broken down vehicle junction 52 to 51.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with skyroof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For a chance to win a motorhome and cash, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
A very, very good evening to you and welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Today, the government dramatically watered down the ban on new petrol and diesel vans and cars, but should we just ditch net zero altogether? In a moment, I'll be joined by the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Plus, I'll be speaking to the former Managing Director for Vauxhall Motors. Plus, we'll cross live to Washington, D.C., where Donald Trump will welcome Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. All of that to come on GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Welcome to the show. Let's jump straight in. Today at the Jaguar Land Rover factory in Solihull, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer promised to rewire our economy and even hinted he'd be prepared to water down net zero to help us achieve that. But Trump's tariffs are looming large over the global economy. And is it time for Starmer to go even further and ditch net zero red tape and channel his inner Brexiteer? Well, joining me now is Tim Tozer, the former managing director for Vauxhall Motors. Mr. Tozer, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your esteemed company. So today, some murmurings, perhaps in the right direction, were made at the Jaguar Land Rover plant. Was it enough to save the beleaguered British car industry?
I don't think so. I think that the issue of tariffs from the USA are very damaging potentially for Jaguar Land Rover. That is their largest market at the moment. They make about 400,000 cars a year, and a good quarter of them go over the pond. Now, that means that the minister, and I'm sure he'll talk about this, I would urge him to crack on and come up with a deal. We do not have a big deficit or surplus. It's a relatively equal trading relationship, whether it be cars or generally. And we've got to get a trade agreement that would remove the 25% tariffs on Jaguars and Land Rovers crossing the pond. That is an imperative in any circumstance to sustain that business. It's a separate issue then as to whether the changes to the mandate are going to rekindle the industry in the complete sense of the industry, that is car retailers and the manufacturers in the UK, and I think not. I mean, the industry is on the journey to net zero, but this mandate has had, in its first year, that being last year, serious adverse consequences on the industry as a whole. That means redundancies. I mean, you've had job redundancies in Ford, in Essex. You've had the Luton plant, the Vauxhall plant that I used to be responsible for, closing in consequence of the mandate, the owners stating that. And you've had the BMW Mini plant in Oxford, where investment is postponed. So there's an awful lot up in the air. And this mandate, which is essentially based upon targets that are nowhere near being delivered, are undermining the health of this industry. And what we saw today did not make sufficient change to, as I say, rekindle those spirits and get the industry onto the front foot.
Tim Tozer, the reality is the government can puff up its chest all it likes, but 72% of new car sales are presently petrol and diesel. We've had all kinds of encouragement. We've had plenty of fines towards the industry, and they've gone down, well, thank you very much, from £15,000 a unit to £12,000 a unit to every manufacturer that fails to meet those targets. Is the reality that the government is using a stick to try and beat consumers into buying a product they simply don't want?
Most definitely it is exactly that. Last year, private buyers, I'm not talking fleet buyers or business buyers, buying a new car, only 1 in 10 chose an electric vehicle. So there are issues as to why are they not flocking to buy electric vehicles. First of all, the cars are expensive. Secondly, the insurance rates are always pretty heavier than petrol and diesel cars. And you've also got severe oddities in the way that people can charge the vehicles cost effectively. What I mean by that is, if you are lucky enough to have a drive, you can charge overnight on your location at a good rate with only 5% VAT. The moment you don't have that capability and you are at the mercy of charging on the public highways, you will pay 9 times the price. So natural demand for electric vehicles is nowhere near the rate that the mandate insists we get to, which this year is 28%. To get to that 28%, relative to that 1 in 10 that I talked about a moment ago, you'd have to double the rate of sales to private people buying a new car. And that just ain't going to happen. So what we've seen today have been some tinkering around the edges of the mandate, when I would argue, actually, within the context of all of the pressure from the tariffs in the States and the general unease in the business community and the difficulties of the sector, which employs 1 million people in both retail and manufacturing, they should have put it all on hold, it being the mandate, and just let the industry breathe a bit, stop being forced into the way you are, as you've said, pushing people into electric vehicles when they simply don't want them to the degree that the mandate insists. So we've got a big problem. We could have had a tremendous opportunity here to reset the clock today, to sort out the tariffs for Jaguar Land Rover and Mini, actually, because a lot of the Minis made in the Oxford plant go over the pond. I mean, the tariff issues are really only those two problems, because the Nissan plant, for example, doesn't send cars over the pond. So these opportunities have been missed. There are some nice little tidbits, okay, Aston Martin and the premium brands are not going to be suffering this mandate, okay, but they could have made a much bigger statement than they have. And I think the final thing I would say is, I mean, you know, the talk that we had from the Transport Secretary, which was implying that these changes set the platform for British manufacturing to show the world how it can be done for the betterment of jobs and security across the country, that is disingenuous. I mean, at the same time, this government is allowing Chinese electric vehicles in without any tariffs. The Chinese have, over the last few years, built all of the competencies, both in terms of manufacturing batteries and electric vehicles, and the invasion is now coming. This is going to cost jobs. I mean, I don't speak for BMW, but I cannot imagine BMW firing up their investment that they have postponed to move electric vehicle production of Minis into Plant Oxford when you've got very cheap Chinese cars, which by any test are a lot cheaper because of Chinese subsidies.
OK, Tim Tozer, we have to leave it there. Fascinating stuff. The former MD for Vauxhall Motors, thank you very much for joining us tonight on GBN Tonight. I'm joined now by my panel, and that is GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, as well as Gawain Towler, former Reform UK spokesman. Let's go first to you, Nigel Nelson, as we await Jonathan Reynolds, the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, to join us. Nigel, you heard it there. As clear as a nose on your face, people don't want electric vehicles. They're being whipped into buying them. The demand isn't there. The consumer isn't responding. And Managing Director of Vauxhall there stating absolutely with clarity, net zero is destroying the British motor industry.
Yeah, and I'd rather expect the motor industry to say that. The whole point about...
What do you mean by that? I mean, they're trying to sell a product that nobody wants, because the government's telling them to.
It's not a question of no one wants it. It is that if the cars were cheaper, if the infrastructure was there so they could be charged easily, then people probably would want it. At the moment, we're not ready for it. That's the problem. Now, what Keir Starmer has done today is to make it a bit easier. I think as we just heard, perhaps on the margins, you know, white vans, high-end cars, those kind of things.
You just said it wasn't the giant leap required. It was thin gruel. And these are the same people, by the way, that were saying Brexit would kill the motor industry. Net Zero's doing a good job of that.
Yeah, I mean, you'd expect the industry to say that. This is my point. We still have to go back to that, back to the issue of, do we want to try and get to net zero or don't we? I think we're going to miss the target, whatever happens. But every time you water water it down. You won't. We had the hottest year on record last year. For the first time that we had...
What on earth that got to do with Jaguar Land Rover, with Vauxhall Motors?
It is all part of the green agenda. So it applies to a whole load of industries. The oil industry is trying really hard to actually become net zero by 2050. So there are industries doing it. The car industry is lagging behind a bit.
Nigel Nelson, you're sounding like you're part of a cult. I'm not being funny. The reality, we just had a managing director of a car company on there saying this is decimating the industry. But who cares a row of beans about that?
5 years ago, he'd probably said it was Brexit that was going to decimate the industry, and now he's saying it's net zero. But he would have probably said it was net zero then too. However, I mean, I do think it is... What sort of world are we in where the consumer doesn't want to buy something and the government punishes the producer for the consumer not wanting to buy something?
Yeah.
And almost all, 1 in 10, he said, are private purchases. Almost all electric cars purchased in this country are for motability, this massive cost on the taxpayer as it is, and for fleets, because they have to, basically.
I mean, the tax break or they get whipped.
But basically, whereas the car producers, the car makers, are being punished because the government sets a target. It's a little bit like Bertolt Brecht sacking the population because they had the wrong ideas. I mean, the wrong people are being punished here. In fact, the only people who should be punished for this is the government for forcing these policies on people. And you say the net zero, we might miss the target.
Yeah.
You say we might. But if you're going in the wrong direction, it doesn't matter if you're going in speed, gear 1 or gear 5. It's the wrong direction.
And the point of the matter is there, Nigel, Tim Tozer, former managing director of Vauxhall Motors, he said the invasion is upon us, the invasion of cheap Chinese electric vehicles. We can't possibly compete with that. We don't own the rare earth metals, and even if we did, we're not allowed to extract them because of net zero. Meanwhile, the Chinese are pumping coal into the atmosphere. They've taken over the rare earth minerals without a shot being fired in Africa. They already hold all the cards. We're playing on a level playing field that's completely unlevel, and we're submitting to China.
We do tariff China, and the whole point about tariffs is they should be variable.
Not on electric cars, we don't.
No, we don't on electric cars.
Well, that's what we're talking about.
But my point about tariffs is they could be variable. In other words, they could be tariffed. E-bikes were tariffed.
But that
and then the tariffs were
one at a time, lads.
The tariffs were removed in February. E-bikes are now 200 quid cheaper. But all these things depend on how the economy is doing.
Well, I think one of the points he was making is the Chinese manufacturers do not play by the same rules that ours do. They get subsidies. Not only do they get subsidies, but the instructions from government and the fact that in many of these industries they use slave labour, and yet they're the good guys. They're the morally good guys. So we buy a Chinese car, feel morally good about ourselves. It's half the price for a British-made car, and yet it's made in a communist country with slave labour, with massive subsidies, and somehow we're supposed to feel morally good. That's wrong.
I'm not sure it's a question about being morally good. It's a question.
Well, we do. It's virtue, isn't it? We've got to buy a green car.
It would be a question about competition. So what our industry needs to do is bring down the price of electric cars. I looked at one.
How do you do that when your energy cost is through the roof?
Well, I mean,
how do you do that?
But this is business.
We're charging our businesses. You believe
in the free market.
Yes, in which case, cut the costs to business. Let them compete. Don't hit them with massive extra charges for energy where they cannot compete with abroad. How would they?
But the whole point is British business has got to compete on the international market.
Yes, in which case
when you need
to
adjust things, you use tariffs to go and do it, as we've done with the Chinese.
But so how we can't manufacture electric cars in this company on the same price as they can in China. End of story. You'd have to be deluded to believe you can. So how do we level that playing field? Right. Either by reducing costs or by putting tariffs up. We've got to move on now because I am now joined by Jonathan Reynolds, the Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Mr. Reynolds, welcome to the show. You may have heard some of that spirited debate. I just had the former managing director of Vauxhall Motors on the show. He was saying that the net zero targets of the government are destroying the British motoring industry and paving the way for a Chinese invasion.
Well, that's what we've That to change today with the announcements that we have made. So look, industry itself wants to transition because the markets around the world which we serve from the UK, which we sell into, have some of these arrangements in place. But what we inherited from the previous government was effectively a situation where factories in the UK, whether that's Nissan in Sunderland, JLR, where the Prime Minister's been in the Midlands today, we're having to pay penalties that would go to factories in China. Now, that's not acceptable to me. That's not good enough. I think people would recognise where's the business case for making stuff in the UK if that is what you have got. So the kind of changes we've made today to the regulatory system are ambitious about the destination, which industry wants, but much more pragmatic in the next few years as to how we get there. And this was the number one ask of the sector, quite reasonably in my view. The situation with the US and the 25% tariff they've announced have meant we've had to push more into that, bring that announcement forward. But it's not the objective that's the problem. It was how that regulation worked over the next few years and the impact that was having on factories in the UK that we had to change today.
OK, but Mr Reynolds, the former managing director of Vauxhall Motors, who knows a thing or two about cars, just said that only 10% of private purchases, forget about Motability, forget about fleet cars where there are heavy incentives and or tax breaks to do so, or in fact they're free if it's Motability. When it's left to the market, 10% of consumers agree with you. People don't want to be taxed out of the market. They don't want to be forced into buying a car they don't want. And meanwhile, the British motor industry is dying on its feet. Surely the answer is to go a bit further than today. Rather than watering down net zero, ditch it altogether.
No, that's not true. You see, so 80% of what we make in the UK, we export abroad. So if we weren't willing to make the transition, we'd lose the entire automotive sector over time. We wouldn't be making anything that we could sell in other countries. Now, the products themselves are fantastic. Business is absolutely right around that. The situation across a whole range of European countries is that private demand has gone down, hasn't increased as it would do. But let's not forget, I think the UK was still the biggest EV market in Europe last year. We've actually seen a very significant rise. About a fifth of sales are EVs now. So in itself, it's quite impressive. But the way this regulation was working meant it was undermining that competitiveness. To back British industry, to back the sector, back British jobs and British products, we've had to make those changes today. Something I think has been absolutely essential. And I was very pleased that the Prime Minister was able to announce that at Jaguar Land Rover.
But in what world is it fair to penalise a manufacturer £12,000 per unit? It was £15,000 a unit. Great, you know, some thin gruel there. 12 grand per car to sell cars that consumers simply don't want. It's all stick. Where's the carrot?
No. So you're wrong on consumers not wanting it. I mean, the products are great. Don't undermine the brilliant stuff being made in British factories. It's really important. Just on the point, the changes are not just about the fine being reduced. They're about the flexibilities from one financial year to the next. So in the main, if there's modest increases, no British manufacturer should be paying the kind of fines you outlined. That's why I wanted those changes. There's also, you can transfer from allowances from van into cars. Other low-carbon technologies now count as well towards it. So there was a lot of changes that were part of that. I do not want any British business, British-based business, being fined for producing in the UK. That's why I've put those changes into it today.
But that's literally the government policy.
That's what we've done.
It's literally your government's policy to fine manufacturers 12 grand a unit. It might be less than 15 grand, but it's still £12,000 a unit. And I put it to you again, rather than punishing the manufacturer for making a car that people simply don't want, it's private sales that matter. It's not acceptable to say, oh, you know, sales are up because of Motability and of fleets. People aren't on board with your net zero journey.
No. Look, what you're describing was the situation we inherited. All of those changes, I think you're focusing too much on the fine being reduced, even though that is important. In the main, the biggest thing for business are the flexibility so that they're not having to pay anything because they can transfer some of those allowances into future years. That's the big change. So I want nobody fined. I do want this transition, or I've got no industry at the end of it to sell things, to export the great products around the world. So you've got to have that trajectory in place. You also don't want to undermine some of the big investments in infrastructure, which is a key sector, key part of UK business as well. The problems you are correctly outlining are what we inherited. The changes today are to correct that and to make sure we're not doing anything which undermines the basis for production in the UK. I think beforehand, the previous Conservative government were too keen to meet this by importing products from other countries. They weren't backing British business. The changes today are exactly what the sector themselves have asked for, and that's why they're so important.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds. Thank you for joining us on GB News Tonight. Quick reaction from the panel before we go. Were you convinced by that? I mean, I just wanted to get to the bottom of the facts.
What I thought was interesting is the fact that he said they can transfer these fines to future years, as if in future years people are going to want to buy these cars. So they are saying this year it's fine, but in a couple of years' time they're going to be double trouble. So I don't think, if anybody's looking at long-term investment, that's actually not a good thing.
OK, gentlemen, we have to move on because after the break, young, isolated British Muslims who are disillusioned with Britain, well, they now pose a national security threat, and that is according to a leading Islamic scholar. Has integration completely failed? We'll debate that next.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So the parents in the right, or should they really be taking their kids out during holiday, during end of term break?
Good morning. Yes, it's a real interesting one, but I think there are a few problems with it. There are already 443,000 absences per year. And actually, if they did get their policy and everyone could have this time off, holiday companies aren't here for the fun of it. They're going to just up the prices all year round. And I think that's what this is about. A lot of parents want to grab an absolute bargain. And it's kind of selfish because a holiday is a choice. It's not a necessity. One of the other things they talk about is send children also need to have time off. Now, I am a mum of a child who has a disability, so I understand the complex needs with that, but that's a given. You know, that's something to take up with a local authority. It's you're allowed to have time off if your child has a medical condition. So, yeah.
It's obviously quite a divisive issue, isn't it? It does separate people into two camps. There's people who want to take their kids out during term time to save a bit of cash, and then there's people who think that children should be in school when they're supposed to be in school. How do you think they'll get on with this campaign? Do you think they'll have any success?
Well, I don't think they will, to be honest with you. I think it's too small. And the other thing is it's quite disruptive on the classroom. If you can imagine, I already play catch up because my son has half a day off a week. So I can imagine if that's going on all year round with all the children, trying to keep track of it, sounds an absolute nightmare to me. I mean, personally, I'd rather just go away on holiday on my own without my child and have some relaxation. So that would be my advice to them. Get the granny in.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, a shocking new survey has revealed that half of young British Muslims feel alienated or disillusioned and even dangerously disconnected from the country that they call home. Less than 1 in 10 Muslims aged 18 to 24 think Britain is a tolerant country. Let that sink in. 10% of young Muslims think Britain is tolerant. Now, a senior Islamic leader warns that the Gaza conflict and the pro-Palestine protests have helped to deepen these divisions and created a dangerous vacuum that extremists could fill. So why is a generation of British Muslims turning away from Britain? And what is the government, or what can it do to try and stop this? Well, joining me now is Fiaz Magal, the founder and the director of Faith Matters and Tel Mama, two NGOs that work for interfaith dialogue, and they're against anti-Muslim hate crime. Welcome to the show, Mr. Magal. These figures are astonishing. Less than 10% of young British Muslims think that Britain is tolerant. Why would they think that?
Well, I think there's been a number of factors that have led young Muslims to come to this direction of travel. I think there has been, for example, over the last 10, 15 years, there has been no integration strategy in this country. Let's start with that. From the Conservative governments right through to Labour right now, there's been no integration strategy. And the way of dealing with that, to some degree, has been to fund groups to do lots of interfaith kumbaya work, which we know actually just plays around the edges of the surface. The reality is, geopolitical issues, you've mentioned the Israel-Palestine international conflict, issues around 9/11, terrorism, extremism, the issues around a lack of an integration strategy. I would say also a basic lack of confidence and pride in our values of our country. That is not also properly promoted to young people. The fact that we should have a proper strategic plan to promote our values, to have pride in our civic values, to have pride in our national and identity values from school through to further education into university, all of that is significantly missing. And so governments have just tried to play around the edges around this.
OK, we talk about government responsibility. What about responsibility from within the Muslim community itself? We see a lot of towns, a lot of cities, a lot of areas within those areas where there simply is no integration through mosques, through communities. So it has to work two ways. This can't all be on the British government to do this. What about the Muslim community embracing British values, as you say? That sounds great and very utopian, but the fact of the matter is we're going backwards. Young British Muslims think of Britain as more hostile, as less welcoming. Something is going very, very wrong.
I'm afraid you're absolutely right. Let me explain why. So I'm 50-plus generation. I see no difference between myself and another Brit, whether they are of a different background, etc. I see no difference. I can relate to, I can engage with. But yet, 2 generations down, there's an anger I find in some of my co-religionists and a sense of separationism that I cannot actually identify with. So yes, there's a problem. Let's just be clear about that. The second element, absolutely you're right. This is a two-way street. And I've been one of a small number of individuals who put my head above the parapet to constantly say, why is that effort not being made by institutions within Muslim communities? Why are we not listening to things that sometimes we may disagree with, but we listen to them? Why don't we not engage with groups and communities where actually there may be some difficulty, but actually reaching out and embracing and engaging is the way forward? Why don't we listen to new values, new ideas, and embrace them? So I fully agree with you. And I think there is a long way still to go in some of the institutions within parts of Muslim communities to actually start to step forward and stop being so insular. So I fully agree with you.
OK, thank you very much. Refreshing honesty, and thanks for coming on the show. Much, much appreciated. Fiaz Magal, the founder and director of Faith Matters and Tel Mama. Thank you very, very much. Now, let's get back to my panel. Nigel Nelson and Gawain Towell. I'll start with you, Nigel Nelson. Wasn't that refreshing to hear? You know, we're constantly sort of self-flagellating or being whipped ourselves. Oh, you know, it's Britain's fault. We're unwelcoming. We're racist. We're Islamophobic. But as the gentleman said there, what about the fact if this, it appears to me, I'll use the word radicalisation. Young British Muslims seem to be taught to hate Britain.
Well, whether they're taught it or not, I think Fiaz was absolutely right. The important thing is integration is a two-way street. And so it's beholden on Muslim communities as well as other communities to try and make that work. In the same way that the head of the Muslim World League, when he was talking, made the same point, that without integration, you have the threat of extremism from Muslims, but also from non-Muslims.
You're about to say far right there, weren't you?
No,
you almost said it.
I was avoiding that. Because it is from non-Muslims. I don't think that far right comes into it. It is the danger of extremism from two different perspectives. Yes, we've got to understand that Gaza to Islam is a major event which affects the entire worldwide Muslim community. An attack on one Muslim in Islam is an attack on all. So inevitably there will be British Muslims who will be upset about Gaza. But when it comes down to the nub of it, it is the integration. It's about trying to prioritise domestic issues, not foreign ones.
OK, Nigel, let's take it to you, Gawain. It's one thing saying it must be a two-way street. What about the people actively embracing anti-British Islamism within the United Kingdom? The hate preachers, we used to call them. There's got to be some accountability. This isn't all Britain's fault and it isn't all our government's fault.
I'd agree. There's one thing I did want to pick up, though, you were saying about we should be more convinced of our own values. Because I've always believed that if we, as a nation, have given up on ourselves, why should somebody arriving here cleave to it? Why should they? Because if we don't believe in it anymore, why should somebody arriving here say, I've arrived there, but I'm going to stick with what I've got, because at least we believe in it. These Brits, they've given up. Well, and it is beholden on us to actually... And he was talking about schools teaching our values. And I would say, and I suspect I'd disagree with him, our values are based on Christianity.
Well, but are they? I went through Luton yesterday. And pulling into Luton, I saw like 4 or 5 mosques. You know, going through parts of Luton, I didn't see a single white person. We have enclaves.
But that is a failure. There's a failure of our own
enclaves of communities that simply never mix.
We need to be more confident in who we are if we're ever going to convince people to be part of us.
But you are talking about, hang on, if we're talking about half the UK Muslim population is under 25, and we are talking about people not who've arrived here, people who were, most of them would have been born here.
And I would say that, in a sense, is more insidious. British-born Muslims are more anti-British than the older generation. We've got a huge problem.
The tolerance mentioned there, only 1 in 10 believe this country is tolerant. I'm wondering, and it'd be interesting to drill down, if they're talking about the majority population being tolerant or themselves. Because I think in many cases they do not feel tolerant. And you must remember, tolerance is not about agreeing with. I do not tolerate you, Nigel, because I like you and I've got no problems. But I tolerate people I dislike and I disagree with. And the word tolerance has become something that it didn't mean. It means agreement these days rather than acceptance.
Okay, well, I mean, tolerance should be a banned word. It should be about freedoms.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. Let's tolerate each other's opinions. Thank you, Nigel and Gawain. Now, the government has delayed plans to tighten immigration rules, which had been expected to be published by tomorrow. Now, what is to blame for this delay? Well, the Cabinet can't agree. Now, the government is pointing the finger, of course, at Donald Trump. Now, speaking of which, we'll be crossing over to the president very shortly. That's all after the break. Stay tuned.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique.
And you're fighting like rats in a sack.
But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask.
OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician.
Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back now. Another week, another broken promise on immigration. The government's white paper on cutting net immigration, which hit nearly 1 million last year under the Conservative recall, well, that won't appear until after the May elections. Now, as recently as a fortnight ago, ministers were briefing that the white paper wouldn't be published by tomorrow. Why? Well, because the Cabinet can't agree. And of course, they're blaming that man, Donald Trump's tariffs, for spooking business. Yes, that's right. Instead of taking responsibility, they're once again pointing the finger at America. Let's get into this now with my panel. GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, as well as Gawain Towler, former Reform UK spokesman. Nigel, I'll start with you. As soon as anything goes wrong in the economy, the Labour Party's answer is more immigration.
Well, it's not so much more immigration, it's not having less immigration or changing the immigration rules that will start affecting business. And the government's absolutely right that what Donald Trump has done has thrown the entire world economy into a mess. So while that mess is being sorted out...
So between now and Friday, we've completely changed our entire net migration target because of Trump's tariffs. It's an excuse.
No, it's not. I mean, there are certainly cabinet disagreements. I mean, take the one between Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, and Bridget Phillipson, the Education Secretary. If you clamp down on students coming here, we can't fund universities.
Who cares? There's too many of them anyway.
Well, if you want to see universities go bust, fine. If you want to see tuition fees rocket for British students from 9,500 that they are now to something phenomenal, yes, you can do all those things.
That's because foreign students pay over the odds and choke British students out.
They don't choke British students out. You're absolutely right. They do pay over the odds. They pay up to £30,000 for tuition fees. They keep universities going. It means that non-profit making courses can be available to British students. If you discourage them coming here, and bear in mind the Tories did. The Tories started off by saying we wanted 600,000 foreign students by 2030, reason being to fund universities. Then they changed the policy and stopped dependents coming here. Now we're talking about not having an extra 2 years here after they've graduated.
The Tories got it wrong as well. It's not competition. It's not a race at the bottom. The British public, are sick to the gills of 1 million net immigration. We thought the Labour Party promised to take back control, Gawain Towler. Yeah. Here we go again. It's Groundhog Day. As soon as we hit turbulence, oh no, keep the borders open.
Well, I think it's very interesting that they've, instead of Friday, it's going to be after the May elections. Why on earth is the Labour Party suggesting that it won't have its policy and white paper produced until after the council elections? Is it because they're scared, absolutely scared of the rise of reform?
No, because they have to deal with the problem of tariffs at the moment. And the last thing you want to do is to add another burden on business.
Why is it not now and then? Come on. Marcus McSorley in number 10 is no fool. He knows that a policy that will say we want to increase or keep at a high level mass immigration into this country will play heavily into reforms.
That's exactly what they're not talking about.
Let's not talk about local elections, lads. Let's keep this broad.
We're not talking about keeping immigration high. What you're talking about is how you reorder the system. If you start reordering the system while we're trying to sort out tariffs, that will affect business.
I would say that if we're going to increase, what's going to affect and is affecting business is increasing minimum wage and things of this sort. That is already affecting business.
All right, but let's not add another one to it. Let's not add immigration as being a problem.
The fact is that mass immigration is increasing costs to the ordinary people of this country, and continuing that, as Labour seem to be saying, oh, well, we need to ensure we have another tranche of low-wage staff.
Legal migration won't be increasing costs. That people can't get...
Of course it increases costs.
People can't get here unless they actually can pay their own way. So it's not that.
That's not true.
But it is accepted that immigration is too high. We're talking about legal immigration here, that it is too high.
So you agree?
I agree it's too high.
So how is changing your plans going to affect that?
Well, because the whole point here is that the plans are there when the white paper is produced to reduce immigration. What you don't do is reduce it while you're trying to handle tariffs, because that would affect business. Because people who are coming in here to do jobs won't be able to.
We know that
that will interrupt business, make it more difficult for businesses to do their job.
The sort of jobs that the government has been talking about are things in social care. How is Trump's tariffs going to affect somebody working in an old people's home?
Not talking about social care. You're talking.
That's actually the majority of
the white paper will change the points-based system. That will actually affect skilled workers, and
no, it will stop people who work in kebab shops being described as skilled workers. That is a good thing, and that doesn't.
You need 70
Trump's
points.
Tariffs doesn't make a blind bit of difference about that.
Of course it does.
It affects people who work in nail bars.
One at a time.
Trump's tariffs do affect that. They affect business, and if you start affecting the employability of business, that just adds an extra problem they have to face.
I think it will only be a good thing, because if we cut out the low skill that we call high skill, such as people working in kebab shops, people working in nail bars and things,
the Deliveroo economy,
and then say, yes, just concentrate on the high skill, which is supposedly what they were going to do, that isn't going to be affecting the Trump tariff thing at all. It's just going to cut out a lot of people who are coming over here without the skill sets, without the wage qualifications. Good. And the country will love it.
OK, gentlemen, we have the call time on another superb debate, but don't worry, because up next we're crossing over to the president. Yeah, that man responsible for British immigration. Very shortly, that's after the break. Stay tuned.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello. Well, if you are off on your Easter break, it is colder in the southeast Mediterranean at the moment. Having a look at the detail, we've got some colder air coming down from the Arctic, so actually much below average for the time of year. Across parts of Italy, there is some sunshine, especially then more so across France, parts of Spain and Portugal. But towards the far west, we will see outbreaks of rain and some showers. And then as we go through the week, many places will see some sunshine before it turns a little bit downhill later.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello again, very good evening to you. Here's your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We're going to stay pretty fine with lots of clear skies as we go through the rest of today, overnight and into tomorrow, all because high pressure firmly in control. This high pressure has been with us for a little while, and we're still going to be under the influence as we go through much of this week. That means lots of clear skies to come as we go overnight. A little bit of cloud perhaps around some North Sea coastal parts, and Orkney and Shetland staying rather cloudy. Otherwise, yes, clear skies, allowing a touch of mist and fog to develop in a few places, and for temperatures to dip. It could get to, well, several degrees below freezing across some parts of Scotland. Most places just about holding up a few degrees above, but a touch of frost is quite possible in prone rural spots. First thing tomorrow morning, any mist and fog should relatively quickly clear. There's likely to be a little zone of cloud to the south of London like we saw through this morning. Otherwise, plenty of blue skies across much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, though towards the North Sea coast coast, still a bit more cloud here, and some eastern parts of Scotland also seeing a bit of cloud, some mist, some fog, some murkiness perhaps, and that could be a little bit slow to clear for some of us. Always cloudiest though towards the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney and Shetland. Again, similar to today really, it is going to be often quite cloudy here. As we go through the day tomorrow, plenty of sunshine on offer yet again. Perhaps a little bit more high cloud than we've seen through today, so the sunshine may be a little bit hazy at times, and there could be some thicker cloud towards parts of East Anglia and Lincolnshire. But actually, temperatures are likely to be a little bit higher, a degree or so, so highs of around 18, 19 Celsius perhaps. As we go into Wednesday, and a bit of a change because of the position of the high pressure. So eastern parts going to be dragging in quite a bit of cloud here. So a cloudier story than we've seen of late across the east. Further west though, plenty of sunshine and again feeling pretty warm. More fine sunny weather to come as we go through the end of the week though. There may be a bit of rain starting to push into the far north later on. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sure.
Welcome back. Now, shortly we'll be heading to Washington, D.C., where President Trump will be holding a bilateral meeting with Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu. We'll go live to that as and when it happens. No doubt there'll be a barrage of questions afterwards about tariffs, of course, the main topic of discussion. President Trump has imposed them on the world, and it prompts the question, what are they all about? Is it about trying to reverse globalism? Because for decades we were promised cheaper goods and economic growth, but at what cost? Manufacturing jobs vanished in Britain and in America. Local industries were hollowed out as we sold out industries around the world. Now, for many in the working class, globalisation didn't deliver. It dismantled the economy. Now, President Trump hopes to change this and bring production home, but can tariffs really build what was lost to globalism? Can tariffs make America great again? Well, I'm joined now by the US political commentator Laurie Laird, as well as my panel. And that is, of course, Gawain Towler and Nigel Nelson. Laurie, it's a pleasure to meet you for the first time in person. Many times.
The first time we've been in the same space.
Yes. Lovely to have your pleasure of your company. Tariffs. What do you think, as an American, they're about? Is it really about trying to do a deep reset on globalisation? I mean, like Nike, for example, a great American company, doesn't pay a single dime in American tax, doesn't make a single thing in America. Can this work?
Wait, steady here. Nike does pay U.S. taxes. It does. It's not paying no tax whatsoever. You're right that they make almost nothing in the U.S. Now, the concept that perhaps Americans may be better off sewing their own running shoes in a factory somewhere may make them more prosperous than educating them to the extent that they can perhaps work in financial services or, dare I say, television. The fact that that may make them better off, I kind of question that. You asked me what's Donald Trump's point. Wish I had a real good answer for that. There is one thing that Donald Trump has been consistent about, though, and that is that he believes tariffs work. He has fetishized tariffs for decades. We've seen him go back and forth on many, many things, reproductive rights. He's always believed in tariffs. He seems to believe that this will create a manufacturing sector in the U.S. It will create America's unemployment problem. America doesn't have an unemployment problem. Unemployment's about 4%. Now, that's an aggregate number. That's not to say that some areas that were manufacturing areas, perhaps mining areas, haven't been devastated, and there's been a failure of government to not train people in those communities. But there isn't a massive unemployment problem in the U.S. that is waiting for a manufacturing renaissance to scoop these people up and employ them.
But like in Britain, we've seen the working class communities hollowed out. Our steel industry, shipbuilding, coal, the great British industries all were sold out to the third world, to Hong Kong, to China, to Bangladesh, to India. My home city, Nottingham, used to be the lace capital of the planet. All gone. In America, the same thing has happened. So there's a huge tranche of America that doesn't feel any better off by globalisation. In fact, they feel completely left behind.
And you brought up a fantastic parallel, although I believe that Nottingham is making some inroads in R&D and research and development, particularly in the pharmaceutical industry. There has been some progress there in taking a workforce and retraining that workforce for things that are more productive and ultimately better paying. But you're right. In pockets of both countries, there have been failures of governance. There have been failures to retrain people. There have been failures to protect people when these jobs have been taken away. But that is not the entire country. And to say, in the case of Donald Trump, let's bring back every manufactured item that Americans buy and put those on American soil, and somehow we'll be more prosperous. I don't know who's going to staff these factories. Are we going to pull people off of Wall Street and have them working in these trainer factories?
Well, sure. I mean, we're seeing today in the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer trying to kickstart the British motoring industry, but we're crippled by net zero, things that Donald Trump doesn't have as barriers in his way. Cheap energy could be the engine, the driving force of a reinvigorated American industrial base. Surely he can train American people to build motor cars at a competitive rate.
Of course you can.
Isn't that his point?
But where are these people? I go back to neither country has, in aggregate, a national problem with joblessness. There are communities where joblessness is a problem. I don't deny that at all. But let's go back to creating more factories here in the UK. Who is going to staff these factories?
Brits,
there are many more vacancies in the UK than there are people looking for jobs. It would be great to train the local workforce, but there aren't that many people who are looking for these jobs. Same is the case in the US, and it's getting much worse because immigration is down. Immigrants tended to provide construction jobs. I don't know who's going to build these factories.
I digress. I remember
put the beast here, haven't I?
No, I remember. Look, I come from a coal mining community. My dad was a miner for 47 years. Everybody was fully employed. Everybody was proud to have industrial jobs. They were proud to make cars, proud to dig roads. They weren't jobs that were deemed lesser or jobs for poorly paid people, jobs for immigrants, because people wanted a day's work. And that's what those communities lost forever with globalisation. Nigel, globalisation hasn't been any good for Britain, and are tariffs a way of kickstarting this and making the West great again?
Well, I think tariffs are harmful to everybody. So it's harmful to America, that it's likely that inflation will go up, certainly growth will go down, and America could end up in recession. That could actually extend to the rest of the world. So no, tariffs are a bad idea. Globalisation, yeah, it's over. Well, Keir Starmer was saying today, as far as he's concerned, it's over. As far as Britain's concerned, services are our big industry. We abandoned a lot of manufacturing. We probably won't bring it back, but we can still prosper with high tech, with AI, with modern industries.
Quick minute to Gawain Taylor before we go to Jacob.
Even those industries that you just mentioned, things like AI, the AI are massively energy intensive. And again, we go back to net zero. You're not going to bring back any of that sort of industry, the high tech, high cost, high wage industries, if you keep on penalising people for setting up business, because that is what is happening at present. So globalisation, I'm not sure what he means by it, but globalisation may be over, according to Keir, but does that mean we're not buying from Hong Kong or Taiwan or China or anything, or does it mean something completely different? And I'm not sure.
Gawain Taylor, Nigel Nelson, we have to leave it there. And also, thank you very much, Laurie Laird. It's a pleasure to have your company in the studio. Now, coming up next is State of the Nation with Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. Sir Jacob, what's on your menu?
Well, inevitably, we're going to have to talk more about tariffs. I've got a particularly brilliant panel this evening with John Redwood and Lloyd Russell-Moyle. What on earth's going on? What is going to happen to the global economy? But there's more to talk about too. Not all of life is tariffs. We're going to have Sharon Davis on talking about this extraordinary thing where two men won a ladies' pool competition. You really couldn't make it up. It's absolutely extraordinary. And that's one of the things Trump has got right, criticising far-left activists for insisting that men are women when obviously they're not. And Sharon Davis has been very outspoken on this, obviously extremely famous, successful swimmer. And so we've got lots to talk about beyond the Donald.
Superb stuff, and you're absolutely right. Sharon Davis has been an absolute titan on the issue of men in women's sports. Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you very much. State of the Nation is up next. Thanks to my wonderful panel. It's a pleasure to have your company. Have a fantastic evening. But first, though, here's your weather with Alex Burkill.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, very good evening to you. Here's your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We're going to stay pretty fine with lots of clear skies as we go through the rest of today, overnight and into tomorrow, all because high pressure firmly in control. This high pressure has been with us for a little while and we're still going to be under the influence as we go through much of this week. That means lots of clear skies to come as we go overnight. A little bit of cloud perhaps around some North Sea coastal parts and Orkney and Shetland staying rather cloudy. Otherwise, yes, clear skies, allowing a touch of mist and fog to develop in a few places and for temperatures to dip. It could get to, well, several degrees below freezing across some parts of Scotland. Most places just about holding up a few degrees above, but a touch of frost is quite possible in prone rural spots. First thing tomorrow morning, any mist and fog should relatively quickly clear. There's likely to be a little zone of cloud to the south of London like we saw through this morning. Otherwise, plenty of blue skies across much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland, though towards the North Sea coast still a bit more cloud here, and some eastern parts of Scotland also seeing a bit of cloud, some mist, some fog, some murkiness perhaps, and that could be a little bit slow to clear for some of us. Always cloudiest though towards the far north of Scotland, particularly Orkney and Shetland. Again, similar to today really, it is going to be often quite cloudy here. As we go through the day tomorrow, plenty of sunshine on offer yet again. Perhaps a little bit more high cloud than we've seen through today, so the sunshine may be a little bit hazy at times, and there could be some thicker cloud towards parts of East Anglia and Lincolnshire. But actually, temperatures are likely to be a little bit higher, a degree or so, so highs of around 18, 19 Celsius perhaps. As we go into Wednesday, and a bit of a change because of the position of the high pressure. So eastern parts going to be dragging in quite a bit of cloud here. So a cloudier story than we've seen of late across the east. Further west, though, plenty of sunshine and again, feeling pretty warm. More fine sunny weather to come as we go through the end of the week, though there may be a bit of rain starting to push into the far north later on. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.